This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scenes at the end of each episode, or even contribute to the discussion in the episode itself, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture. So it's really hot today here in New Zealand and both the cities we live in. Makes me wish we'd bloody recorded this before sunset. Or after, or before...
No, before sunrise, when it would still be dark.
Before sunrise, when it would still be dark. There we go.
We are recording before sunset.
I mean, we're also recording before sunrise because time is a loop.
And before midnight.
And a flat circle, and everything we have done, we are destined to do again, such as this podcast. Welcome, everybody. My name is AJ.
Wild West.
And I'm joined by old Cowboy Richard over there. We're doing a cowboy episode.
Covering the rootinest, tootinest films this side of the Mississippi.
This is Film Franchise Fortnights, where every fortnight we discuss a film franchise, usually either chosen at random or chosen by our patrons over at patreon.com/cultpopture. We've been doing this for years, and today is a momentous day, one we're looking forward to, and it is, of course, Valentine's Day. Or just before Valentine's Day when you're listening to this.
Yeah, if you
so
live in
happy Valentine's Day.
One of those, fascist states where it's not Valentine's Day.
South of the equator. South? West of the equator. Wait,
but here in freedom time, it's Valentine's Day.
So we are covering the Before trilogy this fortnight on Film Franchise Fortnights. This was suggested by our patrons, and we were like, give us a Valentine's Day, a love-themed one, and we'll do whatever you guys pick. And this was neck and neck with 50 Shades of Grey trilogy, and I at the time I was like, I really like the Before trilogy, but I could be partial to watching the 50 Shades trilogy as well. And now here we are 2 weeks later, and boy, am I glad that I didn't spend the last 2 weeks watching the 50 Shades movies because I was able to revisit these wonderful films and bathe in their franchisium glory.
And we also get to admire each other's chiseled good looks.
Very good, very good. So yeah, welcome everybody to our discussion on Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. I've said the name Richard so many times on this podcast, and I just fucked it up there. So for this episode, we're going to go maybe more appropriately with any other franchise and have a conversation about these 3 films, about conversations. The Before trilogy consists of Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. Please watch them before you listen to this podcast because we're not very spoiler friendly here, and I really think people should watch these wonderful films. They were released across 9-year intervals in 1995, 2004, and 2013, and follow the romantic highs and lows of Jesse, an American man played by Ethan Hawke, and Celine, a French woman played by Julie Delpy, as they discuss everything from love to movies to animal abuse at one point to porn to nothing at all.
A lot of the conversations are very philosophical is kind of the point.
Yeah. And each film takes place at various points within one day in 3 separate countries. And what time of day do each of them take place in? I'll give you a clue. Before sunrise, sunset, or midnight, depending on the film. So all 3 films have made their way into the Criterion Collection, as well as receiving plenty of awards, love, and critical ecstasy over the past 30 years. The Before trilogy is considered by many to be one of the greatest film trilogies of all time, and we may even agree with that sentiment ourselves. We'll find out. Their tomatoes are fresh, their Ebertian stars are generous, and last year The Independent listed it as number 3 on their list of greatest film trilogies of all time, being beaten only by Lord of the Rings and the original Star Wars trilogies, which aren't trilogies, I'm sorry. They have more films in the series. I do not count that as a trilogy, especially not in the grand scheme, so we may as well consider Before to be the best trilogy then, if those two are disqualified. Interestingly, of those top 10 trilogies, the only ones we haven't covered on the podcast outside of Star Wars was the Living Dead trilogy, which started the list at number 10, and is also definitively not a trilogy with more films that came out after it, and the Apu trilogy, which is an Indian trilogy that I've barely heard of. That came in just before at number 4.
Words are fun, aren't they?
They are, and it's not the last time I've had fun.
We're going to be
words.
using them on this podcast.
Also included was Indiana Jones on this list, which is also not a trilogy. And so all I'm saying is that if 4 out of 5 of your top 10 trilogies aren't trilogies, it really weakens the integrity of your listicle. You know, that's my feedback to The Independent.
Thank you very much.
I'm excited. Richard, are you excited? We're here. We've been doing this podcast for over 6 years. And here we are. We're finally talking about what many would say is the best one. And I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and let's get on with it. All
right. Before Sunrise came out in 1995, directed by Richard Linklater. What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes?
100%.
There's 100%
as a fair warning,
Tomatoes.
I know all the Rotten Tomatoes skills.
I bet you do. And can you tell me, and I have a backup in case you get it wrong, what is Before Sunrise about?
What would I get wrong?
I know, I just always do backups in case, but for this I probably didn't need to. But.
Okay, so we start on a train. It's going from Budapest back to Paris, presumably. And
a Eurail.
Yeah. And Jesse is played by Ethan Hawke, is on his way to Vienna to catch a flight back to the United States after he had it's later revealed in the film that he was visiting his girlfriend and they broke up while he was here, and he has a chance encounter with this French woman named Celine, played by Julie Delpy, who is going back to university in Paris. She's been visiting her grandmother who was ill. They strike up a conversation, and the immediate chemistry is palpable, you know, and so Jesse, after quite a nice conversation, Jesse hops off the train and then, comes back onto the train, but the very kind of like, I'm going to regret this if I don't shoot my shot. He comes back onto the train. They're stopped in Vienna and he says, get off the train with me. He says, like, think about this, you're an old woman looking back on your life, you're always going to wonder, like, I should have got off the train with that guy. And says, like, I've got a flight in the morning. I don't have enough money for somewhere to stay, so I was just going to walk around Vienna all night. Do it with me. Let's just take this chance and do it together. And she eventually gets off the train, and the entire movie essentially, like, to boil it down, is them walking around Vienna together and slowly falling in love. And they have, as I said, it's the movie is almost entirely just conversational. And, slowly getting more intimate, and you can sort of see the chemistry build between the two characters. So along the way, things like they meet these two, like what I think is like, and we'll touch back on this, I think, but this really like well performed, these two actors they run into, like the characters are actors who invite them to their play. And there's just like this really nice little bit of acting from them. It's the first people they run into. They say, like, what can we do in Vienna? And they say, oh, we're actually in a play. You should come see it. It's called Bring Me the Horns of Wilmington's Cow. And, but they go up to them and they say, do you guys speak English? And one of them says, like, oh, do you speak German for a change? But as he does it, he's like fiddling with his fingers. It looks like he's like picking a fingernail or something like that, and then kind of like turns around and throws it away, and as he says, like, oh no, it's a joke. And it's one of those like beautiful acting choices that absolutely does not feel like acting. And watching the film again, it's one of those things that so stood out to me.
Just celebrating the acting performances of this film and don't go for Ethan Hawke or Julie Delpy and why it's so well performed.
And then then they go to a record store and they flip through. They go into this listening room together. It's the photo on Instagram. It's this beautiful, very intimate, stolen glances kind of moment as they listen to a song. What else do they do?
They kiss on a Ferris wheel.
Yeah, they kiss on a Ferris wheel. They get a poem written for them by this guy. And it's essentially, so they go through all these things. They go to a bar, get some wine, and then sort of spend the rest of the night in a park. And they talk about whether or not they're going to have sex. They kind of agree not to, and then it's left ambiguous whether or not they do, in this film at least. And then the next morning, Jesse has to leave to catch his flight, and they've sort of talked about like, let's not exchange numbers, let's not write letters because it just gets depressing and you fall out of touch. But then as they're leaving, they're like, oh fuck, I don't want to fall out of touch. I really, really care about you and I want to see you again. So they say, let's meet here again in 6 months' time, and we'll pick this up, kind of thing. And again, the film, for this film at least, leaves it ambiguous as to whether or not they're going to actually meet each other again.
Yep. And what do you think of this film, Richard? You cynical old man. What are you? You're not at all warmed by the glow of Before Sunrise.
All right. Well, so I'm going to try and be like as honest and vulnerable as I can during this episode.
I think it's appropriate for Valentine's Day.
Yeah. So, I am, I know I come across as a cynical old man, and that's the image that I've put forward on this podcast, but deep down, I am like a romantic. I like to believe in love. I love, the idea of love, and even watching like shitty romantic comedies at Netflix time, there's still a part of my body that is warmed to see. Like when we talked about Tall Girl on a most disappointing episode recently, and the sort of the romantic conclusion of that film still sparks something within me. So, my history with these films. Glad you asked. So I first watched Before Sunrise and Before Sunset in about 2009. And they, at the time, it was, there's this perfect duology of films. There's these two films, that's all there is, that's all there's ever going to be. Right. And they're perfect. And so I watched them. I watched them quite late one night in bed. And I absolutely fell in love. On watching them again, I forget how probably these are some of the most important films I've ever seen to me. Like the watching Before Sunrise marks a change in my life where I became a movie guy, where I stopped being a film guy like I was for most of high school. Stopped being a music guy like I was for most of high school and became a movie guy. And yeah, I think watching it when I did, I was, would have been, 16, 17? And I was probably just in the early stages of my like first serious relationship, or hadn't even had it yet. And yeah, the way I looked at the world and the way I looked at love was very in line with Before Sunrise. This is, you watch this and this is like the ideal. This is the best love you could ever, this is the best romantic experience you could ever hope to have. And it's this perfect little package. And I've always, probably started by this. I've always loved like movies where it's just people conversing most of the way through. And this is kind of the gold standard of that. I've often cited Ethan Hawke as one of my favorite actors. That's because of these films. I wouldn't know who he was if it wasn't for these films. Yeah, I truly think that this film and this trilogy is absolutely perfect, and I could do a 2-hour podcast on this by myself. Like, all
right, I'll stop recording then.
And it is almost one of these things as well that like,
I'd actually prefer if you weren't here.
Yeah,
can you please leave?
Because that is the thing that people have been like, people have been watching along on the Discord and yourself, and like writing these reviews for the film with like, yeah, this film fucks. Like, this film makes my pussy wet. And to me, it's like, this is the most pure like beautiful love I have for a film, and everyone being like, "Fuck, it's hot," and it's like, and it's like these films.
Hey, they're not mutually exclusive feelings. I would argue.
But like these films are truly like, for a long time felt like mine. As, you know, especially before Midnight came out and sort of brought it again into the spotlight. It was like these two little hidden gems that were only mine, and. To lead into your experience of the film, I actually remember your experience of the film, and this is the fun the other AJ story I teased last week or last episode. Okay. So the year is 2014. Boyhood is in cinemas. Obviously, Richard Linklater's other big experimental, time, people
changing.
Do you remember
over
this?
The course of? What are you going to talk about?
So you and I, we studied together in 2013 and 2014. Yes. You'd left and I was still there, and we ran into each other in the cinema at Boyhood.
Okay.
And this is another one of these classic stories where you come off like a pretentious dick and you don't remember it.
You don't remember the times I don't come off as a pretentious dick.
So. Yeah, at the end of the film. Or
I don't even remember running to you at the cinema.
So, and you're with a couple of your friends, and I think it might have been after the film, we sort of said, "Oh, what'd you think?" kind of thing. And you're like, "Yeah, we just watched this. The director made this trilogy of films called." And I was like, yeah. And you're like, yeah, they're before Sunrise, before Sun, and like, so you made them 9 years apart. And I was like, yeah, I know. And then. And you were like, yeah, like, and you just kept on explaining the films to me. And I said, like, yeah, I know them. I'd seen them. And it's one of these things.
That must have infuriated you.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that, like, this week that it's like this, but like I think like the thing that annoyed me was that you couldn't even comprehend that someone else knew these films, that you wouldn't even listen to me. And I was trying to think, like, this would be like if you and I went to the premiere of Uncharted and I was like, yeah, the same studio made this trilogy called Jack and Daxter. And you'd be like, yeah, I'll play them. And be like, yeah, no, we just discovered them. It's like about this little ocelot.
Ocelot? It's about an otzel, actually. Richard, I'm here to tell you I am almost certain I just probably couldn't hear you in the cinema because I cannot hear people. It's a real problem that's persisted for years.
But it is funny that the way like you would never just assume I hadn't seen or heard of something.
No.
Now.
Well, I don't think I did it then. I think I probably just couldn't hear what you were saying.
And it set our friendship back several years.
The podcast could have started earlier.
Yeah. If instead of that you'd said, like when we were talking about Boyhood, if you'd said, do you know what? We should start a podcast about films together. Because, like, you would have seen Richard Linklater's before Trilogy, right? And I'd be like, yeah, of course. And then, you know, we could have.
That'll be our first episode. Well, very interesting. And you did tell me you had another story, and I was like, God, why can't you remember the good times? You're like a character from one of these movies.
You also haven't remembered any positive stories about me pre-podcast.
Well, why would I share positive stories when you don't share positive stories?
Well, you haven't shared any stories.
Okay, well, I remember going to a party and seeing you there, and we were good friends, and everyone said you were a mini-me, which is funny because you're older than me.
That was the first conversation we ever had.
Is that not romantic that I remember that? Yeah, so...
No, you were just like, all right, memory one, all right, cool. I think that's a memory for Richard.
Don't need to save anymore. I'd never heard of these films until probably before Midnight came out. So I didn't have that. So I'm actually kind of jealous that you were able to experience at least one of them in real time as they came out, because I just knew of them after they were already out. And you'd see it in conversations on Reddit threads, like, what's the best film trilogy? And people would be like, the Before trilogy. And it'd be like, what's this art house bullshit that I'm never going to watch, you know, because I'm 21 and don't care about things. That's not true. I probably care less about things now than I did at 21. So I watched the only 2 times I've seen these films have been watching them all back to back. Like, I've never just watched one and not watched the others. So speaking of before Sunrise, because I have to really concentrate to remember which one I'm talking about with the first two. Before I so yeah, my feelings on Before Sunrise. Like you, I very much love this film, and I think that it's so rare to get a romance movie that's not also a rom-com. When people talk about romance, they're almost exclusively discussing rom-coms, and I feel like this is not really a comedy.
Yeah, it's a rom.
It's a rom, and how rare are
rom.
roms? I feel like we haven't covered any roms on this podcast before. Only ever rom-coms. And I think the acting in this movie is brilliant. I think the script is brilliant. I think the direction is brilliant. And the first time I watched this movie, I remember feeling the moment I fell in love was, you mentioned it before, the stolen glances at the listening booth in the record store, how they're like out of sync, like one will look at the other and then look away and then the other. And like this is nested in a film which has already cranked out a couple of long takes. Like one takes for you that have just been full conversations, and it's so beautiful and it's so wonderfully hopeful, and I think that the something that I think is really fascinating for me personally is that this was as I said, this is my second watch of the whole trilogy, and the only other time I saw them was 8 years ago, and so I'm just shy of having essentially the same experience that Jesse and Celine have in the second film, and the main thing I'm struck by rewatching this one now is how young they are in Before Sunrise. They're so hot. They're both so hot. This is the hottest one. This is the one where they're at their hottest. And I think that when I was younger, when I watched them, I was younger than them, and now rewatching them, I'm slightly closer in age to how old they are in the second film, and that has added a new lens to this film, I think, because now I can see their sort of reckless young, throw it into the wind romance as being both reckless, but also it taps into what love really is, even still, no matter what age you are. And I think that's very attractive.
Not to just one up you immediately. It's been exactly 9 years since I watched these films. So I do have that experience. But so I watched.
You said you watched them when you were like 16.
Yeah, and I watched them a bunch of times. So I watched them when I was 16 in 2009, and then watched this perfect trilogy, the perfect duology, a handful of times, and so this is kind of the interesting thing as well. Like, not like, I feel like this is kind of one of those franchises we need to have like a general discussion about the entire thing rather than going film by film, because so much.
I wish you'd told me that before I spent 4 hours writing up a movie by movie plan.
But so I watched I first saw this trilogy when I was in a very sort of similar state in my life, despite the ages and stuff, to how they are in the first film. And then I rewatched it again in anticipation of Before Midnight coming out, and at the time I showed it to my girlfriend, who was a very sort of I think we'd been together about a year, and so it was really at that sort of like analysis of the relationship stage. And then I watched and like, could this actually be something more, yada yada yada. And then watching them again now, I haven't seen them in 9 years, and I've now been in a relationship for 5 years, and so it is like, if you've seen Before Midnight, it sounds really dark to say, but it is like we are a lot closer to Before Midnight than Before Sunrise.
Yeah.
It's like, and I'm still closest in age to probably halfway between Before Sunrise and Sunset.
So they're 23 in Sunrise, they're 32 in Sunset.
Right, okay, well then I'm different.
So we're closer to 32.
Right, yeah, I thought they were like 25.
No. Well, look, you're the one that brought up one-upping each other's experiences of this movie, and maybe that's a fun thing to ruin our feelings for each other and this trilogy by making a competitive thing of who likes these movies more. But you
introduced a numerical value that was one off, and so you're like because obviously, as these films teach us, love is something that's hard to quantify. The number 8 and the number 9 are pretty easy to quantify, and one's better.
You're the one who's turned it. I'm saying that I would argue that the fact that I've only ever seen them once 8 years ago is more powerful than I've seen them a bunch of times, but the last time was 9 years ago.
I disagree. I think the fact that I'm able to relate to each film differently because I watched them at 3 different times in my life is actually better than yours.
You watched the first 2 at the same time of your life? What do you mean you've watched them all?
Yeah, I've watched them all at different times of my life, but for a while there was only 2.
This movie, this first one, I've written here, it's true twee. It is uncorrupted, unpretentious, unabashed twee. I think this movie's vibe is what Zooey Deschanel wishes her brand was. But twee is so appropriated these days by like big ukulele that it hardly ever feels authentic. And this movie just feels so authentic, and it's like this movie doesn't know it's beautiful, and that's one of the other things that I like about it. Do you have any favorite moments that we haven't talked about yet in the film, or favorite lines or anything you want?
Well, obviously, Bring Me the Head of Wilmington's Cows, Bring Me the Horns of Wilmington's Cow. It's fantastic. Yeah, I don't know, like, it is interesting watching this now. I mean, this isn't necessarily a favorite moment. It's the opposite of what. But it's not even a complaint. But it is interesting watching it now, slightly older, because when I was younger, especially the way Ethan Hawke's character talks, it's very like these long philosophical kind of things, and you're like, and you watch this when you're 16 or even early 20s, and you think like, God, he's so deep. Like, this guy has it figured out, like, and the script is and the script is written. Because Richard Linklater is about 10 years older than the actors, and he's, I think, still at that age as well, writing this, that the movie doesn't want you to see through it,
Mm-hmm.
And watching it now as a mostly cynical 29-year-old, you see through the bullshit kind of thing. And as you watch the other 2 movies, you see that facade strip away a little bit. You realize this guy doesn't actually have it all figured out, and he would probably cringe. The character would probably cringe at the things he was saying in the first film.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's sort of what I was trying to get at before, but you put it much more Jesse-in than I did, as in eloquent. So officially, this movie was written by Richard Linklater and someone named Kim Krazan, whom Linklater brought on board after realizing how desperately the screenplay needed a female perspective. But after being cast, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, while uncredited, apparently rewrote significant portions of Before Sunrise, with Delpy later stating that she and Hawke added, get this, romance to the story. As before this, the bulk of the story was more just people talking. Delpy believes they went uncredited on the screenplay as it would have impeded securing funding, because you're going to easily get funding by saying, hey, it's the guy that did Dazed and Confused wants funding to make a movie, whereas I guess Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy weren't as big of a name back then.
Yeah, he'd done Dead Poets Society.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sure she'd done stuff. She would have done Three Colors White by this point, I think, as well.
Yeah, this is our 3rd Julie Delpy franchise.
So the film is not
right past that.
Well, it's because it's incorrect, and we'll get to it later.
What?
The film is.
Okay.
Oh, do you want to do this now?
Yep, I do.
Okay. All right. Here's what I'd written it so well. Where have I written it? It's like in another section entirely of the episode plan, which we
It's our 4th.
and
No, yeah, you're right.
and very romantic. Very romantic terms we throw out the window.
Yeah.
So I wrote here, interestingly, despite Ethan Hawke being considerably more famous than Julie Delpy, Before Midnight is only our fourth Ethan Hawke film covered on the podcast after the other two Before movies and the Magnificent Seven remake, while this is Delpy's eighth, as she appears in the other two Before movies, the entirety of the Three Colors trilogy, if only fleetingly in blue and red, Avengers Age of Ultron, and she is, I forgot completely until researching this up, she is one of the main characters in American Werewolf in Paris.
Yeah.
So, there we go.
Yeah.
Wasn't that fun? I'm going to just say that again when I get to that in an hour.
Do it.
So the film is not improvised, despite feeling that way, but instead heavily rehearsed, to the point where the three main players involved have all said that they think it's really funny when people say it's improv, because it was actually like grueling rehearsal, like the opposite of improv. And the original nugget of an idea, though, of having a romantic night walking around with someone you just met, that did come from Linklater, who based the idea on an interaction he had with a woman he met in a toy shop in Philadelphia in 1989, where they walked around the city together and conversed long into the night. While originally wanting Jesse and Celine's story to take place in an unspecified city, Linklater later linked the ideas of autonomy, freedom, risk-taking, and romance to being abroad, stating that while exploring a foreign city, a person is more open to experiences outside your realm.
Did you have written down the conclusion to the Richard the True Story?
Yeah, it's in dumb IMDb trivia. Should we just go to that?
Sure.
So yeah, and if you go to the IMDb sections of all of these films, everyone just repeats the same information over and over, including that little tidbit I just told you then. But there is more to the story. I put this in dumb IMDb trivia because it's not exactly dumb as it is just like kind of bums me out. But it says, so that this woman that Linklater walked around Philadelphia with was named Amy, and Kim Krazan also claims that she had a similar experience. She said she rode around Europe on trains meeting people, and on one trip met a Norwegian man on the way to Paris, and ended up walking around the city all night, much like Before Sunrise. Krazan has never revealed whether or not they had a romance that night, and they lost contact. Linklater and Amy stayed in touch for a while until contact was lost, and he never heard from her again, and it was not until 2010 that Linklater found out that Amy had died in a traffic accident before the release of Before Sunrise, the first film in the trilogy. Then it says, Krazan has never reconnected with the Norwegian man that was her inspiration for the famous night walking around a European city.
Yeah, do you have any similar stories like this?
Yeah, no, I was gonna. I've also. Have you in my Google Doc?
Well, no, so have you eloquently pre-written a paragraph?
Yeah, about the last three things have been steamrolled over in favour of the order that I want to talk about things.
Oh, sorry. I mean, yeah, if you've planned it rather than coming up naturally. It's funny, people think this podcast is improvised, but it's actually very gruelingly
rehearsed. It is the next thing we had to talk about, so not too bad. But yeah, I've written, so knowing that this was inspired by true
not
events.
Too bad.
And knowing
if it wasn't that bad, you could have just said it, been like, yes, actually.
You're totally right. I didn't realize, because I had to scroll down to a different section of the page only to go back to where I was originally to see that it is the next thing to talk about. Look, this is a conversation. This is naturalistic dialogue. This is what people want. People think that this is gruelingly rehearsed. Were
you just about to make the same joke I did?
This was also rehearsed, this part.
You also wrote that down. It'd be like, compare it to that.
Yeah, knowing how warm and fuzzy it makes everyone who watched it feel, and in honour of Valentine's Day, Richard, I thought I'd ask you if you had any similar experiences to Before Sunrise that you would like to share.
Right. So, instead of answering my question, you were like, oh, no, the script says I'm supposed to ask you. Do you have one? Because I asked you first.
I've got my defenses up now, and it's so bullshit because I don't want to be defensive. I want to be like, I want to have a conversation about this trilogy we both love, and I'm making mistakes, and you're not forgiving me for it.
There's no mistakes. It's just a conversation.
I'm making mistakes, I said, not us.
No, I said. Well, yeah, no, that's why I said that there shouldn't be mistakes because we're just chatting. And now you've gone away from the microphone.
Sorry, I need to get my water because I'm all foamy mouth.
I'm foamy mouthed. My mouth's foamier.
Foamy mouth, Richard, is actually when your mouth gets real foamy, and because you've been talking like real passionately. It's like I like how you complained about that cinema story, that Boyhood story, was that I essentially just mansplained the movie to you. All right, I can share my story first if you like.
Cool, because you were asked first, so it makes more sense.
Alrighty. For content warning, I do have to bring up some...
Content warning, I do have a boner.
A lot of the story isn't it's not necessarily relevant, but it's helpful context to know that I used to be a very devout Christian, and a lot of the story is sort of nested in that story. I want to make it very clear.
I don't know if content warning was the right... I mean, I guess it's better than trigger warning.
You'll hear it. You'll hear why.
I've been like, okay, here's a night I spent with a girl. Content warning. Not exactly what do you want to say. Yeah.
We had sex. So if you are a Christian, no, I think that that it's. I just want to make it clear that I haven't been Christian for about 4 or 5 years now. Yeah. So it's not really reflective of who I am. So, when I was a teenager, my parents had friends in Australia and they were maybe looking to move over or something was happening. And so the mother of that my parents were friends with came over and they brought with them their daughter who her and I had this random connection. They stayed at our house and we really got along and it's one of the best kisses I've ever had in my life was with this girl. And it's not as dramatic as Before Sunrise, in that when she left after the weekend, it wasn't like we're never going to speak to each other. We kept in touch a little bit over Facebook and stuff, and it wasn't until 2015 where the dying embers of me trying to stay Christian pushed myself toward going to Hillsong Conference in Sydney, Australia, which if you've never heard of, this is Chris Pratt's church. You know how everyone hates Chris Pratt now? It's because he goes to this church. He wasn't there, but Justin Bieber was there, and it was crazy. There was a girl behind me crying because she could kind of see Justin Bieber in the crowd.
Sorry, where was this?
Sydney.
Sydney, right, yeah.
And while this is happening, and I like this girl, I wrote a poem about her. You know, like she was very much like
that poem. Actually, I remember.
I probably have.
You remember you standing in the doorway to our kitchen, reading.
Okay,
these are positive story.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this a positive story? You're making fun of me because. So. She had become sort of the stuff of legend with me and my friends because they knew about this girl that I had the best kiss of my life with. And while we're sitting in Hillsong Conference in 2015 waiting for the show to begin, I sort of there's like 30,000 people there, by the way. And like I sort of just glanced to my right and I'm sitting in this chair and walking past the aisle, I see her for a brief moment. And I was like, "Buh?" And I was like, was that the girl? And I told the people, I think that she's here. And I messaged her that night. I was like, are you at Hillsong Conference? And she was like, oh my God, yeah. And I was like, we should meet up. And she's like, I'm youth leading. I never have time, but like, let's try figure something out. And for a couple of days, we're like messaging each other, trying to find each other. And on one of the days, she's posted on Facebook, like a photo of the stadium from where she's sitting. And I look at the photo and I look at my view and I'm like, this is the same view. Like I'm looking at the same view and I was like, where are you? And we stood up we were about maybe 20 feet away from each other. She's one row above me. And we're like, oh my God, it's so crowded, right? It's so crowded. But my friends and everyone around us like sort of form a rolling convoy to move me to her and her to me. And we like hug and everyone clapped. And I wish I could tell you like we hung out for a lunch and made love under the church lights, but nothing as exciting as that happened. I did see her again at that conference before leaving and have never seen her again. and am not Christian anymore, so I can't
Probably never
imagine
will,
she'd be as interested in me either.
Mm.
But yeah, that's sort of the closest I can relate to this kind of like distance, like
Yeah.
time has changed us sort of thing.
Mm.
That's about as I've had romantic stories, but that's the
Oh,
closest
I've had my fair share of romances. Don't get me
but
wrong.
that's the closest I think to the before sunrise setup. I think. What about you?
I don't know, as like in terms of this sort of, I do have like a shooting my shot, like the one time I've ever done that. There's one that didn't happen, and it's like one of the main regrets of my life.
Everyone have that. I have that as well.
Yeah, but I remember I just got given this new shirt for my birthday, and I thought I looked really good. And there was this girl on the bus, and we just like kept catching each other's eyes, and she was like gorgeous. And I still beat myself up to this day that I didn't.
Was it your Deadpool chimichangas shirt? She kept looking at me. I was like, "Yeah, you like Deadpool?"
Yeah, and like we got off at the same stop, and she walked the same way as me for a little bit, and then turned around, and I'm like in the 10 years since it happened, 11 years ago. I'm still like, fucking goddamn it, why didn't I? But that is one of the things though that strikes you about getting older, and specifically fatter as well, is just that like people don't look at you like that anymore. You don't have those experiences anymore. And I had one chance.
As someone who's just been gradually getting fatter their whole life, I've never had those experiences.
Yeah.
So count yourself lucky that you
it hit me like a fucking steam train in 2016. Yeah. So the kind of the other closest experience happened in the same year actually. My 1 year where I was attractive. I was at we were studying. This is at my course, and there was sort of like a reception area to it, and so there was like these big sort of black doors, and then the reception area, and then glass doors, and someone walked through, and the door kind of like did like a swinging back and forth like a saloon, but like it was literally like in Big Fish, like time completely froze. I saw this girl standing outside the glass doors, and yeah, it actually was like that. I stood there transfixed for a moment, and it's like, and I was like, this is actually the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't know, something about that day, I went and spoke to her and just said like, hey, introduced myself, said what's up. Turns out she was actually there to meet like the worst person I know. But then and like him and I did not get along. But she then came into our course a few days later to see him, and I went and talked to her again, and then he texted me like that night being like, hey, she wanted me to give you her number. And so, and then we had a few before sunrise-esque sort of things. I bet
he liked sending you that message. But he loved delivering that message.
Yeah, I know. Like, I wouldn't have done it if I was in his position, to be honest.
No,
so,
I wouldn't have either. And to be honest, I think I would be fine with if he didn't. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, to be like,
absolutely. Yeah.
No, I'm not going to give I like you. I'm not going to pass your number to someone else.
But yeah, and like we had a lot of those moments where it would be like, I mean, fuck, bro, I was like head over heels for this girl, and I mean, like it would be like things like I would walk across town to meet her at a party, to just wander around the block with her for 20 minutes kind of thing, and we would have these big sort of conversations. We went on a few dates, and it was just like we would just wander around the botanical gardens until sunset came, and I kissed her exactly once, and
she blew up into a smoke.
Never saw her again.
Wow.
But yeah, that's like out of all the sort of experiences of my life, my quote unquote relationship with her was the only sort of like this sort of like love or whatever you want to call it, of just like, it was just this very like Yeah, I don't know. Around the same age, around the same sort of feelings, and
I
more
just
one-sided than I would have liked.
I was just thinking of your current partner and sometimes host of the podcast, Jess.
Who gets really
listening
jealous
back
when I tell stories about like this?
Oh, don't say that.
I know
I was
she's
just gonna say, like, listening to this
steaming like mad.
and just being like, you talking about this girl, being like, and be getting very close to saying, and that's really the only time I've felt love in my life.
Yeah, but I didn't say that. Let the record show.
I know, and you don't even mean that. You're talking about
Well,
this.
Like, Jess is probably in the shower at the moment, listening to this. Like, I mean, I know she's at work right now, but as she's listening back to this, she's probably in the shower. And I feel like I was going somewhere with that, but I've now forgotten. So I just everyone knows, Jess. Everyone knows that you listen to this podcast in the shower. So
if I was you, I would now say, like, talk about how, like, what you have with Jess is actually far more fulfilling and important than anything.
Well, I'll do that when we get to before midnight.
Okay. God. Alrighty.
Well, because I actually do have, like, I relate to each film.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
So this film, Before Sunrise, is our 21st film to be nominated for MTV's Best Kiss Award. These come in no particular order, but other nominees / winners include Spider-Man, The Matrix Reloaded, X-Men 2, X-Men United, Twilight, The Twilight Saga New Moon, The Twilight Saga Eclipse, which had 2 nominations, The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 1, but not Part 2, High School Musical 3 Senior Year, Lethal Weapon 3, Desperado, Ace Ventura When Nature Calls, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Deadpool, Venom, Romeo plus Juliet, Scary Movie, Moulin Rouge, American Pie 2, and Dumb and Dumber, which actually beat Before Sunrise. So Jim Carrey's dumb fantasy kiss and Dumb and Dumber beat Before Sunrise for Best Kiss of 1995.
That's insane.
And finally, I do have some more dumb IMDb trivia here. So this is, in case you don't know, on IMDb, there's a trivia section which is user submitted, which often means a lot of it is not that interesting and pretty dumb. This includes, during a conversation about their first sexual feelings, Jesse explains to Celine that he had an obsessive relationship with Miss July 1978 and then refers to the playmate as Crystal. The name of Miss July 1978 was actually Karen Morton, not someone named Crystal.
I sure hope somebody was fired for that blunder.
And finally, one of the albums Jesse flicks through in the record shop, the blue album with the face at the top, is Misfits by the Kinks. It's like, okay.
Just one of the albums?
Yeah, it's just one. It's like clearly someone who loves that album wanted to add that into the thing. But before we move on, Richard, to the second film, I do want to talk about something that we've talked about with Rambo that we've started as a new segment, and it's something that I'm wishing we didn't call franchise, which is, to clarify, it's not wise like as in wizened or wisdom, it's wise as in the question. Franch why?
Yeah, so why is this a franchise?
And so, yeah, this is something we thought we could talk about with the first film in each franchise that we do from now on, is that what about this prompted a franchise out of this? Because for a long time, there didn't need to be, like, it wasn't considered necessary to do a follow-up to Before Sunrise because it ends in a way that is hopeful, that it asks you, the audience, do you believe Jesse and Celine get back together?
I think it's one of those classic litmus tests.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what Linklater actually calls it, a litmus test. He says it's a litmus test.
We have more in common than just our first names.
It says, I always saw the movie as a litmus test for how you view romance. Some people would go, it's so clear they will never get back together. Some people were so sure. He said that the viewer's interpretation depended on their romantic history, and apparently Delpy, Linklater, and Hawke are romantics, and they knew Celine and Jesse would come back together, which is very funny considering that's not what happens. At least not as it's written in this version. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on Franch why?
Well, I think it's interesting that, like, yeah, it's this lingering question, is the sort of like, and I think it needs it does definitely need that 9 years. Like, if you'd made this sequel after, say a traditional sort of 3 years later sequel, it then is like, oh, they're making a sequel, but it ends on such a perfect note. Whereas 9 years is like, yeah, actually, what did happen to those characters? Like, you look at the question differently after that amount of time, I think.
Yeah, sure, I get you.
And so I think that it's just a little voice in the back of Richard Linklater, Ethan Hawke, and Julie Delpy's heads that did say, you know what? What if, actually?
Yeah. It was maybe also happening in the back of Kim Krazan's head, who is definitely the unsung hero of this franchise, because I don't think she returned for the third film, but she did return for the second film, which was called Before Sunset, came out in 2004. Richard Linklater directed. Do you know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes? I bet you don't. But you don't know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes.
He'll never know what this has on Rotten Tomatoes. 95.
It's currently 94, actually, so it's gone down one. Wikipedia still says it's 95, but if you go to the actual website, Rotten Tomatoes, it says 94. So some other established critic has absolutely just scoured, like hated on this movie since it came out. What is Before Sunset about?
Did Kim Krazan return for this?
She returned for this one.
Because, yeah, she's not credited with writing the screenplay. Is that like a...
Story by Delpy and Hawke wrote the screenplay.
Yeah, and Linklater, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that necessarily means like returning.
She was on board for story elements of the second one, from what I understand.
Yeah, sure. So okay, Before Sunset. It's 9 years later. Jesse is now a best-selling author. He's written a novel called This Time, which is based on the one night together they shared 9 years earlier. He's doing a book tour around Europe, and on the final stop of that is in Paris. And who should show up but Celine? And it's revealed they haven't seen each other in 9 years since that one fateful night. It's revealed that... And initially they both say, oh, I wasn't there. Like, don't worry, I wasn't there either. Because Celine's grandmother, who she was visiting in the first film, passed away, and her funeral was the same day they had agreed to meet. And Jesse says, oh, don't sweat it, I wasn't there either. It's later revealed that he actually was there. And it, broke his heart, sort of thing. And, changed his relationship with love irreparably. And then... he says, you know what, I've still got 90 minutes before I need to leave for the airport. Can we grab a drink? And so they just wander around Paris. The film takes place in real time. And they talk about, we see where their lives are at now. They talk about work. So Celine is, what's she up to these days? She's an environmental activist, and she's going out with this photojournalist. And... Jesse is now married and has a son named Hank, and as it sort of continues on, it's revealed that his marriage is fairly unhappy, and this was... I'm sure this is in your notes, sorry to spoil it, but this was very much clearly based on his relationship, Ethan Hawke's real life marriage to Uma Thurman breaking down around this time, and he was drawing from those experiences a lot. But the spark that we felt in that first film was slowly reignited over the course of the film, and it ends up that he goes up to her apartment because she talks about how she writes songs, and he's like, I have to hear one of these songs before I go. And she sings this this waltz to him, which has his name in it. So it's clearly written about him. And then the film ends, they put on some Nina Simone. And in top 5 greatest film endings of all time, without a word of exaggeration, she's dancing, imitating Nina Simone, talking about she saw her in concert one time, and Jesse is sitting there on the couch just watching her, and you can see in his eyes, like, realize having that sort of battle inside his head of being like, should I throw my entire life away for this girl? And the final lines of the film, she says, baby, you are gonna miss that plane. And he says, I know, and the film cuts to black.
It actually
And
fades to black,
fades
which
to
I
black.
think is much sexier than a cut to black.
Yeah, and like, straight up one of the greatest endings to a film ever.
I agree. I mean, I said that I saw this in 2014. I reckon I've thought about that ending more than I've thought about any other ending to any movie since then. Like, it's such a perfect ending.
Yeah.
What did you think of this one? Is the question.
Well, so this is interesting. So I watched this, like I said, I watched this in 2009 as part of a duology, and I remember not thinking as much of it as the first one. I was like, this is a perfect duology, but to the first one really spoke to me because it was like, this is the life I want, you know? This is like, it's like, God, if only I could have this. And then rewatching them again and showing them to my girlfriend at the time in anticipation of Before Midnight, I really this film blew me away, and I related it to a different way, because the first film was really this thing of like, is true love possible, and is love at first sight possible, really, and what does that look like? And the second film is like, okay, well, you have love at first sight, but it's like, was that really love, and what does that actually mean? And then the third film was like, yes, that was, but that, what does that mean? Because love is actually really hard, and true love and you know, spending the rest of your life together is hard. And so I've seen people call this film a bummer, but I think, and it kind of is, like, in some ways, not as much as the third, I'll say, but it is. It's this film where you, kind of just this chance to re-examine those feelings from the first one, that what I spoke about as well, that like a lot of Jesse's character is this kind of like, you can tell as you watch 2 and 3 that he was putting this on, he was talking out of his ass, and seeing in this film like that life has beaten him down somewhat in the last 9 years. I just think this is just everything about this film is it's such a, like, one of the greatest scripts in a film, that I almost think there's something more romantic about sunset than sunrise.
Sure.
I don't know why, but like it's just it's beautiful.
This, I would say this is my favorite of the trilogy. I think that this is the one that I find the most compelling. I love that they never met up in December. I love that it's in real time. I love how messy and complicated their lives have become. I love how, as you say, like, Jesse's been stripped away so completely, and it's quite sad to see. I love the scene in the car where they basically admit to each other to having their entire perceptions of romance ruined because of each other, and it's toward the end, so you've had this whole movie of them insisting they're okay, only to them be like, actually, not only am I destroyed, I'm destroyed because of you. You know, like, I think that's brilliant. And boy, do I love that ending. As you say, top 5. I'd give it top 1. Give it top. I don't care. I think that ending is dripping with sex. As I said, it fades to black, for God's sake. Like, what I love about it, there's a few things I love about it. So one, the fact that she's doing a Nina Simone impression when she says, "Baby, you are gonna miss that plane." It's like an excuse to let her deliver a kind of sultry, cheesy line that she maybe wouldn't have said if she wasn't playing a character. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's this beautiful, like, it becomes almost a pickup line, and it implies so much. I love that the whole movie is basically Celine giving Jesse shit for writing this novel that's about her, and then at the end, it turns out she wrote a fucking song about him. Like, it's the same thing, you know? And that's almost
a book's certainly a lot more effort than
I know, but it still means, like, she incorporated him into her perception of art and love and how she expressed herself. And I think that's almost like a plot twist that she wrote the song about him.
Because she's so hesitant to say his name in the song as well.
Yeah. And I just think that's so goddamn beautiful and so romantic and so sexy. What I like about this film as well, you said people call it a bummer. I think it's challenging. I don't think it gives you the perfect fairy tale continuation you might have wanted from Before Sunrise, but it gives you something a lot messier and upsetting. But that creates a fuller, more realistic, and more earned experience, I think. And I usually and we've both talked about this before, I usually struggle with stories where the main character commits adultery. But in this movie, it's like, it just feels so essential to the theme of it all.
It's like the fact that he's married is adultery, because it's like,
yeah,
no, you're supposed to be with Celine.
That it's dangerously cheater sympathetic, because everyone is like, you should be with Celine, not this other woman.
Yeah, and also Celine's in a relationship.
That's true. And as well, for those who feel similar and they don't like that when characters commit adultery, if you're grasping at straws, they don't kiss in the whole film. You never see them break any vow. You never see them like they do, but you don't see it.
They go into detail in the third one, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's still presented in a way where it's like, they could have done it amicably. They could have ended the relationship. I don't know. I just love how this film, it's one of the most romantic experiences I've ever witnessed, and there is no kissing in it, and I think that's incredible. There's a repeated beat from the stolen glance scene from the listening booth in this, when they're in the car in the second last scene and basically breaking down about how they've affected each other so much since they last saw each other, where Jesse like looks away while he's like talking about how pissed off he is that he let his life and his marriage get to this point, and Celine goes to like pat him on the head, but then like hesitates as he's like turning back to her, and it feels like a repeat of that moment, but like under a different context. God, I just adore this movie. I had such a grin on my face watching it when I was watching it again. And yeah, I couldn't agree with any more with all the stuff that you said about it. I think it's an incredible script. I think
yeah, and watching it again, like. Yeah, just watching these movies again, like forgetting like how much they truly meant to me 9, 10, 12 years ago. Yeah, and insane. And just like, there's so many little things, like you talk about the moment of the reaching for his hair or like to pet him kind of thing. And also the what I said about the Wilmington's cow bit, that like all these moments that I'm like, oh my God, like these were like core memories for me. And yeah, like especially this movie as well. This was kind of the one I was most excited to rewatch, because I think maybe I had watched Before Sunrise a couple more times than Before Sunset, because I liked because at the time it was my favorite. But this is one that, look, even if you'd asked me before rewatching them, I would have said this was my favorite, even though I might not have thought that last time I watched them. But it's like the way they sat in my mind, I was like, yeah, this is the best one.
Yeah. So another return to talking about intimate personal stories. I got stoned for the first time in my life 2 nights ago, and it was very fun.
Oh my God,
and
you do drugs, we get it.
While I was in my state, I had an idea for something we could talk about inspired by this film.
Right.
And this could be like a Watch Mojo kind of listicle kind of video. What is the best example of a character in a sequel turning the story of the original film into a novel? Or into a movie, or into a piece of art. So does it work better or worse if the art they make has the same title as the first movie? Because interestingly, both Before Sunset and the Scream series, which both have now it's the sequel, the characters have made a version of the first film that exists in universe. Scream has a movie series in it called Stab. The series is called Stab, and this time is the name of Jesse's version of Before Sunrise. And in Before Midnight, we learned that Jesse wrote about the events of Before Sunset and called that one that time. This can be contrasted with Lord of the Rings, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, and the final episode of Game of Thrones, wherein the stories written about what you've previously seen are called the name of the series, or the name of the... So in Lord of the Rings, Frodo writes The Lord of the Rings, and in The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Empire, Emperor Evie has written The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, and in Game of Thrones it ends with a cringy ass scene where one of them has written A Song of Ice and Fire, right? And I think what's interesting about this is that in both Scream and the Before trilogy, they use these metatextual stories within the story as devices to drive the plot. It's almost a way to talk about the first movie, quote unquote, in the second movie or the third, fourth, whatever movie. Like, and I think maybe this is why it's a good idea to call them something different, you know?
Yeah.
And also, another note would be that this time and that time encountered the same problem as Before Sunset and Before Sunrise. And what do you call the third one? You've used both the examples. What do you call the next one? So, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, he also has the other... have you got the title of his other book?
No, tell me.
Temporary cast members of a long-running but little-seen production of a play called Fleeting. Because, but is that... That's not the part of the this time, that time, is it?
No, but he talks about it in Before Midnight, and it kind of in a fun way, like, discusses some broad themes that encompass the series as a whole, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fun list. There's Beethoven's my favourite.
Of course, they make it in Beethoven. Like, I wonder if it's called anything. Does it have a name on
that
TV
whole time?
tropes,
I thought you were leading to Beethoven. I thought he's brought this up because of Beethoven,
well,
and then you were like, "Because of Scream," and I was like, "Oh yeah."
I think it's relevant to bring up because it's something that only happens in a franchise.
Well, it's one of those weird things. It's like, why is this a trope?
Yeah. So. You probably know all this because I imagine you bloody froth those Wikipedia pages back when you first watched these films. But for those that don't know, the original idea for a Before Sunrise sequel was going to be a lot larger scale, with the core idea involving 4 different locations. But after this failed to secure funding, the 4 main creators involved reworked several ideas to land on what we eventually got. And Linklater basically said, we sat in a room and worked together in about a 2 or 3 day period, worked out a very detailed outline of the whole film in this sort of real-time environment, and then over the next year or so, we just started emailing each other and faxing. I was sort of a conduit. They would send me monologues and duologues and scenes and ideas, and I was editing, compiling, and writing, and that's how we came up with a script. And Hawke said what I think is a brilliant quote surrounding this whole thing. It's not like anyone was begging us to make a second film. We obviously did it because we wanted to.
Who's asking for this?
Yeah, exactly. And fun little pickup on the story from the last movie is that Hawke and Delpy officially joined the writing team and were credited this time.
And nominated for an Oscar for it.
Nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and lost to Sideways. Have you seen Sideways?
I haven't. Can't imagine it's as good.
Do you have any more thoughts on Before Sunset?
No, I don't think so. I'm happy to move on to Before Midnight.
Alrighty. Before Midnight came out 9 years later in 2013, directed by Richard Linklater. What does it have on Rotten Tomatoes?
98.
Correct. And what is this movie about?
So Before Midnight is... Now it's 9 years later. Jesse and Celine they're in a long-term relationship. They're not married, as we find out. They have twin girls, and this is set on a summer vacation in Greece. And they were there with Hank, who I mentioned in the last film, Jesse's son with his ex-wife. And the film starts with him sending him back to the US and him sort of, dealing with the fact that he has to say goodbye to his son every 6 months, or how whenever they see each other. And then they're on holiday. There's like a few other couples, and so there's like this one has probably the least. I mean, I guess apart from the second one, which is in real time, this one only has like half a dozen scenes in the entire movie.
It might take place over the longest time period, though, out of all of them.
It's not super clear when the start of the movie takes place. But yeah, so there's this part they've been with other couples kind of thing. So there's this couple that have only just gone together. They're quite young and they're in love, and then there's like an older sort of couple, and then there's this much older guy whose wife has passed away, and they sort of talk about that. And one of the other couples buys like a night in a nice hotel as like a romantic getaway. We'll take care of the kids. You guys go spend the nice night in the hotel, and then you can just turn the movie off. No, you shouldn't. But they get to the hotel and they essentially argue for 40 minutes.
What begins very promisingly as the first nude scene of the whole franchise quickly devolves into one of the most heartbreaking arguments you'll ever see.
You'll ever see in a film. But yeah, so it's the sort of the main like thrust of, or one of the kind of main thrusts of the argument is that Jesse hates having to miss out on so much of his son's life, and he throws the idea out there that maybe, like, how would you feel about moving to Chicago? And Celine laments that she's thrown away so much of her life and doesn't get to do anything for herself because she's always having to look after the girls and Jesse.
She's also got a job opportunity that's arisen.
And that she's, sort of umming and ahhing about taking, and, but it would be this huge step forward in her career, and if they move back to Chicago, obviously that would ruin that. And they end up having this massive fight. Celine storms out saying, I don't think I love you anymore. And it ends with Jesse going to see her. She's sitting by herself on the waterfront, and he claims to be a time traveler from the future who has a letter that Celine wrote to herself about how even though this night started rocky, it ended up being the greatest night of her life, and it ends with them somewhat reconciling.
Yeah, Wikipedia says despite their relationship being tested, they eventually reconcile, which is like quite a heavy sentence, I think, because I don't know if it does entirely. Like it's left on a like positive upswing, but we don't see what's going to happen next.
This is the interesting thing though, because so again, I saw this movie in the cinema. I think I left course early because it was like playing in one cinema for one day at one screening kind of thing. So I took half the day off to go see it, and I took my girlfriend at the time, and we'd sort of fallen in love with these characters, and I was like, this is something really important I have to share with you, and I can't wait to see the next thing. And then you see this argument, and my feelings for this film, thank you for asking, I was struggled with for a long time, and I think that's actually kind of why I didn't revisit the film for 9 years. Although, funnily enough, I actually, when I was in Taupo a few months ago, I was flicking through, and this was playing on the movies channel, and I was so fucking tired that day, and I slept through most of it, but I caught bits and pieces of it, and I kind of was like, yeah, actually, I should rewatch these films. But I did see a lot of the argument at the hotel, and remembering like there's this like 40-minute part of the movie that I just like don't know if I have it in me to watch again. And I think what you say, and this is one of those things that looking at it from a different point in my life, and I think a lot of critics and stuff, and fans of the franchise might have looked at this one of being like, oh man, I can't believe we've seen the end of Jesse and Celine. And I don't think we do. And having been in a longer term relationship now, and with being older, and I'm sure this is even more true when you get to your early 40s like they are, I think that this is, and this isn't even a negative thing, but the argument they have is so realistic, and that's why it hurts so much to watch. Because you're watching this, you see yourself, and you side with whoever in the argument, and you think the other person's being crazy. And I'm sure that watching this, people side with different people, and all these bits that you're like, oh god, I wish I hadn't said that, or wish he hadn't said that, and all this stuff. I don't think this is like when if they make a fourth Before movie, which would come out this year, it's been 9 years, I don't think that it necessarily would be like, it would be about that one night we spent in Greece where we had that really bad argument. I don't think this is the worst argument they've ever had. And I don't think that, I think this is but a blip in their relationship. And now I'm not saying that they have a bad relationship because of that. I'm saying that it's like, that's just what relationships are. And I think that's the reality of this movie is that. And I think that's why people responded to it so much, even though it has this like super negative third act. People are still like, wow, like this is actually reality put on screen for the first time. And I think that and also there is interesting, because I've spoken to a few people about this as well, and it happened to me as well. Although my story my story kind of disproves my point, that of this thing of when you get a nice hotel room or something like that, where you go like, let's go have a romantic night, and you plan it out and you say, cool, Saturday night is, we're taking away all stresses, and that's going to be a romantic night. Quite often that turns to shit. And I think it is like, A, you're planning romance, which doesn't really work, and B, the reason you need to have a night like that is because you've got so many other stresses going on in your life that you need to just shut them off for a moment. And so you put two people in a room like that both need to de-stress, and it becomes like a pressure cooker. And seemingly more often than not, there will be some kind of argument there. Happened to me I was in Thailand, and we were traveling with friends, but we said, all right, well, we're staying on Koh Phi Phi Island, where they filmed The Beach, the Danny Boyle movie. And it was like, cool, this can be our romantic night of the trip, And we ended up just like really, really having a really bad fight. And I don't think even ended up sleeping in the same bed together, but like just couldn't stand to be around each other. We did break up 3 months later. Maybe, what do I know? And maybe we have seen the end of Jesse and Celine's relationship, but I think there were other issues in my relationship.
It's funny that everyone's always like, oh, do you have a before sunrise story? And you're like, fuck that, I got a before midnight story. Yeah. Well, Richard, interestingly, despite Ethan Hawke being considerably more famous than Julie Delpy, Before Midnight is only our fourth Ethan Hawke film covered on the podcast after the two Before movies.
Do you not have anything else to say about Before Midnight?
That was just how I was going to introduce the segment. Right. I was also going to work out how many trilogies the Before trilogy brings us to on the podcast, but that's honestly becoming such a hard thing to work out. I've made it clear I don't think it's fair to say Lord of the Rings or Star Wars are trilogies, but it gets more complicated when franchises with a fourth film has come out since we've covered it on the podcast, or stuff like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, which was rebooted. So is that a trilogy? And if yes, does the fact that it was still revisited in another movie, does that discount it as a trilogy? So I don't know how many trilogies we've done, and maybe I'm going to stop counting how many we've done. So I said Before Sunset was challenging, but Before Midnight goes to places of emotional bedlam I don't think I've ever seen in a film. And for this, while it makes me feel the worst out of all three, I can't rightly say I think it's any less brilliant or any less effective. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but I think there's a real cool way of explaining, like, the first movie is about X, and the second movie is about Y, and the third one is about Z. And after I wrote that sentence, Richard, I was on
Ethan Hawke's.
Or Ethan Hawke described this entirely on IMDb, where he says, Before Sunrise is a film about what might be, Before Sunset is a film about what could or should be, and Before Midnight is a film about what is. I think that's a brilliant way to put it, and I think that in a lot of ways, while it's not really a film you'd have in the same conversation as films like this, but it's sort of the opposite of fan service. I mean, everything would have fan service, I guess. And I think it's interesting that neither of the sequels start where you were expecting. Before Sunset doesn't start 6 months later where they met up, and Before Midnight starts... basically, the feeling I first got when I first saw Before Midnight was, my God, I've missed so much. I've missed an entire life they've had together, That's not fair. That's I deserve to know what happened after, like, directly after the second film. And I think that because it flies in the face of what you want, and you still come out the other end feeling changed and moved, I think that is fucking powerful and more important than just having a good time in a trilogy.
Absolutely.
Or
and I think
franchise.
That's why I struggle with my feelings for it for so long, because it is... it moved me as much as the other two, but in a different way. And I think part of me was just like, I hate that Jesse and Celine's love isn't as
Impermeable.
pure as I was promised, and it's not like you're used to movie romances where they fight and then they spend the third act reconciling. This is like they spend the final scene is an olive branch being extended and not even really accepted, just not rejected, and what is rejected, and then it finally like reluctantly kind of accepted. But AJ, I want to ask you a question. Who is right in the argument?
I mean, I think they both have. I think I tend to side with Celine more than Jesse, but I don't think that. I think both of them say stuff that I think is unfair, and both of them say stuff that's an incredibly good point. I think the difference, the overwhelming difference, I think between myself and those two characters is I'm nowhere near as like willing to pick an argument, which probably means I would have a far less productive relationship in terms of like working stuff out as they would. But like, I don't like every now and then like Jesse will say like, see, you sound like an absolute crazy bitch. And like, I probably wouldn't say stuff like that in the heat of an argument, I guess.
Yeah. One thing I will say, which might be my only complaint about this franchise is, and it's like, it's again, it's like, it's making me feel the thing I'm supposed to feel, but I'm like, is they both accuse the other one of cheating on them and neither of them deny it.
Yeah,
and it's like
talk about that as well.
It's I think especially Jesse, he totally did.
They both totally did, I reckon.
Yeah, I think like her, like because his accusal of her is very like, oh, shut the fuck up, like what are you on about? Her accusal of him is like, just tell me yes or no, and he goes, well, if you're asking me this, and it's like he can't lie, but he makes such a big point of not saying no, whereas she makes more of a point of being like, no, what are you talking about? And it's like, or she doesn't actually say the word no, but
she says like you slept with essentially a groupie because he's a achieved author now, and he says he doesn't say no. He says, if you're asking me if I am committed to you and our children, the answer is yes. Which is not no, and it's basically yes, I did cheat on you.
And well, it's this thing of like, I imagine he did cheat on her, regretted it. She somehow found out, and they've never really talked about it. But for him, it was this thing of like, what have I done? I am like, he needed that to realize how committed he actually was, you know.
But totally, and I do think as well there are shades of polyamory
how many shades?
To 50 potentially of polyamory to Celine, especially like the way she talks, the way she accuses him. She's like, I'm not a jealous person, so I don't care. And like that,
well, and he says the same thing. He's like, I know you blew him. You probably didn't fuck him, but you blew him, and that's fine. Just tell me. So
I guess like the shades of polyamory make it a little easier to swallow, no pun intended, I think.
Yeah, well, that it's two people that are very
they've always been very independent,
comfortable in their sexuality, and they're also like I think it's, you know, I don't want to generalize, but I think it's a, well, not so much a French thing, but like a European thing as well,
sure.
Of like looking at sex differently.
Well. Yeah. And I think that adds to how wonderfully challenging this movie is. And I think that if I were writing this, if I had Before Sunset and Before Sunrise in other order under my belt, and I was writing this film and I knew I wanted to put something truly, truly challenging in there, I would grapple with it, but I think I would also imply that they'd been unfaithful, because I think that's the ultimate sign. That's the ultimate thing, that if you can overcome this, you'll be together forever, supposedly, right? And I think that that there is a lesson to be learned here in where to take a film when you get to a threequel, when you get to a third film, and it's a path that's almost never traveled, because I think here we are 6 years on in our franchise podcast, and I think this franchise has made me realize that one of the big problems with the idea of sequeling is you want to take, if you want to take the story in new and interesting directions, it's very hard to do that when you've fallen in love with your status quo and other people have fallen in love with your status quo, and then you get a movie like Before Midnight where it's like, what if the worst thing could happen? And that's so compelling, and that's so beautiful, and that's so much more interesting than just telling a story that's the first half of this movie all the way until the end. Like, something has to happen in this movie that sets it apart from the other two, you know? And I think that challenge is such a big word for me, because each sequel is like doubly as challenging as the last, maybe even more so. And I think that being challenged is something I've grown to really appreciate in sequels, even if it can be hard, even if it can be difficult. I think that's how ultimately you achieve a sequel that, like, history is kind to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the main thing is, like, the truth to each sequel.
Yeah, sure. One thing I also love about this movie, you mentioned that they have lunch with all these other couples. One of the couples is this young couple who kept their long-distance relationship alive via Skype. And I love how the film lets you, the viewer, draw the comparison of how, the first film could never happen in 2013. None of the characters point this out. None of them, they all go like, oh, love is different, these do, whatever. But, like, none of them go like, well, that would deflate the entire Before Sunrise storyline. But it leaves you to realize that, and it's so intentional. And it's such a statement on love and how it grows. Because this trilogy is about time, right? Like, it's even in the titles. Each of them is before time, and and before itself is a word associated with time. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's such a brilliant way of like melting your mind into discussing how things change over time, that not only can the entire premise of the first film become defunct, but this relationship you've spent 2 movies investing in can also reach a breaking point you thought it was bigger than, you know?
Yeah, I also love the older guy at the table who talks about how his wife has passed away, and it's not that big a deal because they're always he gives a little monologue where he talks about their relationship and how he kind of essentially says, like, he wasn't that sad when she died. And
they were always 2 people, not 1 person.
Yeah, and it's it's just a very frank and it's this interesting, like, looking at the table and seeing what love looks like in 4 different ways.
I also love that both elements of Jesse's son from his first marriage, their new children, and Jesse's semi-autobiographical novels all play a major part in driving the conflict. And like this is how you do a screenplay where you're playing with the pieces your world has already set up and you're reusing things to, because it's always better when a movie or a story uses the elements it has instead of pulling one out of nowhere, and I like that it uses the pieces it has. Linklater, Hawke, and Delpy began developing a third film in 2011, wishing to replicate the 9-year gap between the first 2 installments. The behind-the-scenes story I don't think is quite as compelling as Sunset's mysterious, high-budget original draft, but I still feel a respect for, like, the artistry of all those involved and how they felt it was time to return to the characters.
Well, because also, like, you hadn't... but from before Sunset, you hadn't established what a sequel looks like in this, not even a franchise yet. Now you have, so you have a pattern to follow.
Yeah. This film was also nominated for Best Adaptive Screenplay at the Oscars, where it lost to 12 Years a Slave. Try 18 Years a Slave, am I right, Jesse? And a note I want to make on the Rotten Tomatoes scores. So to remind everyone, the first one is 100, the second one is 94, the third one is 98. I think it's very easy, and we so often do treat Rotten Tomatoes scores like a mark out of 100 of how good a movie is. But it's franchises like these in which Rotten Tomatoes' true measurement is actually relevant to talk about, I think, because as we really know, Rotten Tomatoes scores are a percentage of how many critics at least liked a film. And we've said on the podcast before that a Rotten Tomatoes score is basically how likely it will be that you, an individual, will enjoy this movie based on a sample size that is the critic base.
Mhm.
And I think that if you do love, if you are 100% on Before Sunrise, it is the risky nature of its two sequels does mean it's not 100% chance you'll like it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think in this case, because I think the second one is the best one. And I'm not offended by these scores because I think they more tell you like, hey, if you loved Before Sunrise, there is a 6% chance you might find Before Sunset a little difficult to swallow, you know?
Yeah.
You said that there was one thing you didn't like about this film. I've got a question for you. Did this movie need a ticking clock like the other two? Because the others...
Well, that's the interesting that, this one just happens
before midnight. Yeah. The other two take their titles from how much time they have left to spend time together. Yeah, but this is just before midnight. They never draw attention to it. They never... It's just you assume it's all happening before midnight. Do you think it needed anything like... Or even like a...
I know what you mean, and I did think this when I watched it originally.
A closer on the end, like... I'm going away, you better be out of here before midnight. You know, even just that at the end. You know, something like that where it's like a negative, like a threat or something, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
98%. I hate to do this, Richard, especially with such a beautiful franchise. But if you'll trust me in embracing the grime in the same way we trusted Before Midnight wouldn't end in a complete mess of hopelessness, I'm going to need you to grab a shovel because we're digging our way into Problematic Corner.
I bet this didn't age well. Let's get a laugh at someone else's expense. I have to warn you, this might get obscene. This the Problematic Corner where ain't nothing PC.
Now, in terms of conversation topics, all three of these films don't shy away from differing opinions or challenging ideas that the characters themselves bring up in conversations, and this is obviously the beliefs of the characters themselves, and it all adds to the authenticity. But in a series which does a pretty great job representing feminism, some were pretty upset that Julie Delpy has a pretty elongated nude scene in Before Midnight, while Ethan Hawke nary even drops trow, Richard. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call it problematic. I love the nudity in Before Midnight, and not like in a horny way. It's like it's one of those things where it's like I just know tabloids would be like Julie Delpy bravely bears all, you know, like because she's over 40 kind of thing.
She did that in a American Werewolf in Paris.
But I think it's this very true thing, and it's kind of this it's not funny, but it's just very realistic that like you get midway through being about to have sex and it takes her ages to cover up again because it's like, well, who gives a shit, you know? Like I think the nudity in this film is fantastic.
Well, responding to criticisms regarding it, in an interview with GQ magazine, Delpy remarked, "Some people were like, it's not feminist. You're showing your tits and he's not showing his ass. But isn't the people who are hiding women behind layers of clothes who are misogynists? I'm a real person." And so it's a statement to say, all right, I'm a 40-year-old woman and this is what you get with no plastic surgery. Which is very funny to say for, sure, you are a 40-year-old woman, but you look incredible. And I mean that in a horny way. You might have not, but I do. So I think that's a brilliant point, and again, very French, very French feminist.
Yeah, it's like wanting her to cover up is not feminist, you know?
Yeah, I guess I just thought that was an interesting perspective. But before we move on, I do want to return again to dumb IMDb trivia. So we talked about how at the end of this film, Jesse is like, hey, I'm a time traveler and I've got a note from you from the future, which is sort of a callback to in Before Sunrise, where he convinces her to get off the train by saying, imagine I'm a time traveler or you're time traveling. He talks about time travel, and you'll always look back at this and wonder, should you have got off the train with the guy, right? So the piece of IMDb trivia says, in the final scene, Jesse tries to win around Celine and refers to himself as a time traveler. This is, of course, in reference to Ethan Hawke playing a time traveler in Predestination 2014.
Spoilers for Predestination.
Is it really? I apologize. I did not know. We talk about titles a lot on this podcast. And I mean, pretty much perfect by my standards. I guess there's a little part of me that's like, the third one isn't called Before Sun something, but like, what else is there? There's not really any sun. There's nothing else. There's no other thing the sun does. They need a word for there is no sun in the sky.
Night.
I guess that's sunset. And I think the bigger question really is what would you call the next one, which we'll get to in just a second, because first we're going to go do Meeting of the Elders. Very quickly, not very quickly. I don't know. We're going to do Meeting of. We're going to do
Not
Meeting
very
of the
quickly.
Elders.
This is going to take a while.
We're doing Meeting of the Elders, where if you donate to our cult elder tier over at patreon.com/cultpopture, then you get to tell us what you thought of the films over on a secret Discord server. And we didn't get a lot of responses. A lot of people haven't seen these movies, which is very ashamed of you elders for having no idea about these movies. But Dan/Before Dan has given us a very, very well thought out reviews of each of the three films that I thought they're great, and we should go over them now. So I'll read the first one if you want to read the second one, and I can read the third one. So Dan says, Before Sunrise evokes so many memories of instant connection with someone unexpected, the inexplicable hours-long date that neither of you want to end with someone you feel as if you've known your whole life. Love is so paradoxical in that way and so fleeting, and I love how this captured that so. I was reminded of Halloween 2015 when the two of us stayed up literally until sunrise before we'd even been intimate at all. Or July 2016 when someone else and I stayed up countless nights together before she'd have to move away to Florida for an imminent surgery. Our fling encapsulated in that brief summer moment. Or November 2017 when someone I barely knew and I were still awake in the early morning when we went to get breakfast to a couple to complete our first and final date. Or a Halloween party in 2018 with someone I had only thought of as a friend and we began a relationship right around dawn. These moments, these magical nights, resulted in everything from nothing to a year-long relationship, yet I think of them all fondly as capturing lightning in a bottle, like Celine and Jesse when they threw common sense out the window and trusted their gut. Dan, so beautiful, dude.
Yeah, also crazy that Dan and Halloween/November. All right, so then before Sunset, he wrote, Before Sunset played with that enticing fantasy in the back of your mind. What if it wasn't just a fleeting moment doomed to flutter away? After all these years, do they think of me like I do them? Is it just the idea of them? Would they like the real me, fat and warts and emotional baggage and all? I'm almost at the age of the characters, so I've only experienced one thing close to this, but I haven't yet experienced this. Rekindling a connection seems far, far, far more rare than making one in the first place. You've matured since that naive meeting. You've discovered more of who you are and who you want to be seen as. Also, as a writer, I must confess, writing your own loves and life in your work is too real. One of the most fulfilling things in my life was sending a draft of a novel to an old flame and them not only recognizing themselves and us in the story, but giving their blessing that I should not make any changes. We had connected in a summer fling, but when we met 2 years later, any romantic/sexual spark was completely gone. For them to see what we once had and agree upon the fictionalized version of them as something true was truly fulfilling and validating. Part of me will always hold out hope that I will run into an ex and rekindle something. It's the hopeless, self-destructive romantic in me. And he says, I'm truly curious how these films resonate within your own lives and what they evoked. Yeah, same thing. I've said many times before that I'm one of these people who spends far too much time thinking about the paths not taken and the idea of a before sunset meeting with, and thinking about just wanting to know if someone thinks the same thing about you is,
it's an incredible experience if it ever happens, and you'd stay up at night wishing it would. Dan also gave us a Before Midnight review. They said, Before Midnight hit me like a ton of bricks. Falling in love is easy. Staying in love is hard. I was reminded of when my parents would bicker / banter / fight, but still stay together. I was reminded of conversations near the end of a relationship. I was reminded of what it was like to live with a partner and spending time outside of any romantic context. I believe Before Midnight captures the post-honeymoon phase of a relationship better than I've seen in any other media. Cohabitation, collaboration, communication, and harmony and disrepair. Most painfully, I was reminded of the only 2 times I went on vacation with a significant other. In both cases, I booked a hotel. We got along fine / okay, but any romanticism died in that room and never bounced back once we returned home. Both relationships died almost exactly a month after. Very similar to what you said, Richard, even with you. The way that Celine felt about the hotel room resonated so deeply with me, and I'm only just starting to recover. I believe she says she fucking hates the hotel room and would rather stay in like a Greek looking place, like a like an old timey place. As a side note, I really want to read Jesse's books, especially the one he's workshopping about memory. Yeah. So, I mean, again, beautiful summations there, Dan, and I really appreciate you writing all of that, because that really just hits home how effective these movies are, and how like the most cynical reviews I've seen of the, because I'd never done this before. I scrolled through Letterboxd for a couple of them and sort of read some people's thoughts, and there's the classic ones where it's like, I hated the first one, and this one I can't believe how much I was actually able to stand. And it's like, yeah, there's a certain type of person that doesn't like these movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually I'm really getting over Letterboxd reviews for like
really
reasons like that. Yeah, like I hate scrolling through it, because you amazing films end up at 1 star just for some dumb joke review, or vice versa. Terrible films with 5-star reviews. I mean, obviously, you can look at the graph and see what people actually genuinely think, but Letterboxd seems to be more about how funny can you make your review than how well can you articulate your thoughts and give it a score.
I have the podcast for that, so I put all my funny reviews on Letterboxd.
But so it's interesting, like what Dan's saying, that I think watching these movies, and whether it's in 1, 2, or 3, I think if you've ever had feelings of love, there'll be something in here that you relate to. And I think that's what makes them so incredible.
So, continue the franchise. This is our segment where we pitch sequels, but before we do that, it is worth noting that this franchise is one in which continuing it is quite a pertinent conversation. As you said before, a fourth Before film, if it were to come out 9 years after the last, that would mean it should be coming out this year. However, that's not going to happen. In March 2020, Hawke stated that a sequel may likely not follow the previous precedent of a 9-year gap between films. He said, if the first 3 were all 9 years apart, the fourth would not follow that trajectory. He said, Linklater would want a different path, but we enjoy working together and being together. We may have to make sure we have something to say. In June 2021, Delpy said that she had turned down going ahead with a sequel, later clarifying, we, the 3 of us, agreed we couldn't come up with something good for a fourth one. It was an idea that none of us liked, and that was the end of it. So, not a never say never, but certainly not yet. But at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked to hear that a fourth film was going ahead at some point.
Yeah. 2 other things on 3 other things on continue the franchise. One is, like, I remember Ethan Hawke said he liked the idea of a fourth one being set during COVID, and it was them locked down together. And Richard Linklater said that maybe the fourth one they'd make it in like 40 years, and it would be like an English language remake of Amour, where it's these 2 like 80-year-olds and one euthanizing the other.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so
they do
really
talk
idea.
about in Before Midnight. They talk about them being together when they're 80, which I feel like is almost a hint toward that.
Did you have another continue the franchise written down?
Yep, I do. For those wanting to scratch the Before trilogy itch, Linklater has you covered with some of his other projects, most famously, as we discussed earlier in the podcast, Boyhood, a movie which is filmed over 12 years and also features Ethan Hawke. And there is also a movie he made between sunrise and sunset called Waking Life, which is a semi-animated film in which Jesse and Celine...
It's entirely animated.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Jesse and Celine have a non-canon cameo, and you watched it.
I did watch it, yeah. So as a completionist, I went for every Jesse and Celine appearance. Yeah, so it is interesting though. So it's
Could have done it for film franchise follow-ups on Patreon.
we can still do it if you watch it the next few days. I'll still be able to talk about it. But couple of really interesting things about it, because we won't do it for film franchise follow-ups because we're doing Texas Chainsaw Massacre this month.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Looking for my way out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
So, interesting things. So the Waking Life, it's rotoscoped, similar to A Scanner Darkly, but not as, which is also Linklater, but not as refined in its animation style. Like A Scanner Darkly picks one animation style and follows it. It's like, seemingly like between shots in Waking Life, the animation budget was slashed, or people so it's like the reverse shot, one person will be like very detailed and the reverse shot will be like just kind of a blob. The plot of the movie is like just a series of like tableaus, and you've got this main character who for the first 2/3 of the movie doesn't really talk. He kind of just listens to people delivering very Before Sunrise-esque sort of philosophical monologues. And so, it came out in 2001, like you said before. Before Sunset was a thing, and but the whole thing is it's to do with dreams, and it's kind of like he ends up meeting Richard Linklater playing a character. He's not playing Richard Linklater, who's the sort of final character who explains like the dreams and all this stuff. And that's when the main character really actually engages in a conversation. But it has this brief moment where we fly into the bedroom of Jesse and Celine, who have spent the night together. They're clearly in a relationship. And I guess for a while it was like this was the only hint that like, no, they did get back together, But one thing I found really interesting though, so they talk about and they have a classic Jesse and Celine conversation, and they talk about like Earth being like a simulation, or like the dying thoughts of an old woman, and they're just like characters in those dying thoughts, which they talk about in Before Sunset.
Right.
They like in Before Sunset they say, I feel like I'm, they say, I can't stop thinking about, or I feel like I'm part of that. And they reference a conversation they only had in Waking Life.
Oh, interesting.
Which isn't, I think I would need to rewatch Before Sunrise to make sure it's not in there as well. But I thought that was interesting. But because the whole thing is that that is like Waking Life is all about these dreams. So it's not necessarily non-canon. This could easily be the dream of Celine or Jesse. Right. One other final really interesting thing about Waking Life. So again, like I said, it's just these tableaus. Characters pop up for one scene, and there's one where a man is driving a car and he's like shouting out of a bullhorn, projecting to everyone on the street, and he's talking about these like kind of very out there sort of conspiracy theories, and that character is played by Alex Jones.
No way.
Who's also in A Scanner Darkly.
Really?
Yeah. It's like his only two film appearances are cameos in Waking Life and A Scanner Darkly.
I don't remember him in A Scanner Darkly. I watched
it's a brief like voice on the radio kind of role. But yeah, funny that like this was when Alex Jones was just like, look at this wacky guy before he was actually dangerous, I think. But it's crazy that he clearly has a working relationship with Richard Linklater.
Nice. Well,
also, yep. Just while we're talking about Richard Linklater films.
Probably what I'm about to say.
Well, go for it.
Linklater is also working on a musical adaptation of Stephen Sondheim's Merrily We Roll Along, which is planned to be filmed over 20 years. Principal photography hasn't started yet, but the actors attached to the project currently consist of Blake Jenner, Beanie Feldstein, and musical darling / Dear Evan Hansen star Ben Platt. So he's still doing stuff with really long passages of time.
Yeah, to make him look like a chump for doing Boyhood over only 12 years. But I remember Ethan Hawke was like primed to, if Richard Linklater had died, Ethan Hawke was going to take over Boyhood. Right. Because like, I remember reading about Boyhood in like 2007. It was like there's this movie that's not coming out for like a long time, and I think it was called 12 Years at the time, but then they didn't want to confuse it. Was renamed later because of 12 Years a Slave.
Yep. So do you want to do continue the franchise first, or do you want me to do mine first?
Well, what's yours?
Well, I spent most of the time trying to think of a title because all the main stuff has been taken. And without repeating yourself by using different words for sunset or sunrise, like before dawn or before dusk or before morning, I realized the only main section of the day that is yet to see a film reach the climax during is noon. But after realizing how unpoetic before noon, before midday sound, I found my brain stumbling onto the even more ridiculous before afternoon. And this led me to conceiving of the After Trilogy, right? And I propose to you that we wait another 9 years and take us through Jesse and Celine into their late 70s or their 80s, like they talk about in Before Midnight. I think you could call the first one After Sunrise, but I wouldn't mind if you went off script for the other two. So if they didn't have to be After Sunset or After Midnight. I think it would be kind of cool if one of them was called Afternoon, but like two words, not one word. So yeah. The After Trilogy.
My pitch is also the After Trilogy, but it's different.
I apologize.
I had the same thought. Retitle midday. It feels like you have to do midday because it's like before sun, then before mid. You have to do before mid. But yeah, the After Trilogy. My pitch for the After Trilogy, though, because I kind of want to just do after sunrise, after sunset, and after midnight. But my pitch for the film is that we follow Hank as the main character, Ethan Hawke's son. And so my idea for After Sunrise would be that the film starts with Hank waking up and, maybe next to a one-night stand, and it's sort of it's that awkward conversation you have in the morning with a one-night stand, and maybe things don't go. But also, it's 2022. She should, maybe it's a homosexual romance, or he's bisexual or questioning, and then also because I quite like the idea of him experimenting with his sexuality, or gender identity or whatever, and then because you would still have Jesse and Celine be quite important characters in these films, but now we're putting them on. We still get to see what they're up to every 9 years, but not an entire film based on. We get to see Jesse dealing with his son's coming out or whatever, but through the son's eyes rather than making it.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's that After Sunrise would be the morning after a one night stand or some kind of thing when you've realized that awkward conversation, and then After Sunset, could be
at a party.
At a party, anything like that.
Real time at a party.
Yeah, and then After Midnight is you've argued all through the night, and now it's past midnight when we pick up where they are.
What about After Sunrise, Afternoon, After Life? Well, I thought those ideas were great. Well done, Richard. And
well done,
you did
AJ.
a better job than me, but thank you. Well, the last thing we have to do before Franchise Roulette, Richard, is we have to return to our favourite segment, Ranked at Franchise, on our Letterboxd, your favourite website, and your favourite segment. What a coincidence. Where we rank every franchise we've ever covered. And, I mean, this has got a big... not necessarily a long conversation, but it's a big deal to be talking about.
It's not a long conversation at all.
Well, first of all, I think we can both agree that this is a gold star franchise, which is how we let people know. Someone actually asked about this in the Discord today. A gold star franchise is what is like, there is no bad one. It's not they're all as good as each other. It's there is no weak link in the franchise.
Well, because someone asked. So it's a gold star franchise, but we had sort of both indicated that Sunset was our favorite. I said, well, it can't be gold star if they have a favorite, but it's gold star refers more to there not being a bad one than there not being a best one, I think. Yeah.
And in terms of where to rank it, hey, look, at the moment, our current crowning champion is Toy Story. The Toy Story films are at currently the best franchise we've ever watched. And I struggled a lot this week because I know you want to put this at number 1, and I struggled a lot this
And
week.
just get it over and done with.
Basically thinking like, what does the Before trilogy do better than Toy Story? Because if anything, they're evenly matched. I think this has taken me.
Did you answer the question?
No, well, sort of. I guess. I guess, like, because, like, even when I think about, like, the challenging aspect that I love about the Before films, and when I think about the maturity of it, I always went back to, like, well, Toy Story do that as well, and with an extra film, but I think I am willing to put the Before trilogy above Toy Story for 2 reasons. One is it's more interesting content-wise, and I guess the other is, like, as an adult, and their adult movies, does that lend more credence to a kid's franchise?
Yeah, and I just think the Before trilogy is the most perfect film series, not just that we've covered, but in existence.
All right, so we'll put it at number 1, I guess. with that, I'm not entirely sure, but I guess
I also think 4. I know we disagree on this, but I think Toy Story 4 muddies the water of the Toy Story franchise a little bit.
Well, you still ranked it 5 stars on your Letterboxd.
I ranked
review.
it 4.5 stars.
Wow. All right. Now we're going to turn to Franchise Roulette, and it's my turn to make you guess like a chump. So this, of course, is going to be our final franchise, not of the year, but of the season. And if you've never listened to our show before, welcome along. And on this, we're going to basically pull up a list of a bunch of different franchises. Rich is going to give me a random number generator, and we're going to pick our next and final franchise for season 6 off this list, just for full transparency's sake, because we're very busy. We're going from the fun franchise list this fortnight.
Because we actually have slightly less than a fortnight to record.
Yep, so all that means is that they're less taxing franchises of no more than 4 films. Yep. So it's still very, it could still be anything. I'll remove the Before trilogy from the list. All right, Richard, give me a random number.
38.
Yeah, I'm looking directly at 38 when you said that.
And you were thinking, God, I hope it's not this.
All right, number 38, Richard. It is technically it's a 4-film franchise, being that there is the 3rd film in this franchise is a crossover with another franchise which only has 1 movie in it. But both franchises are more known for their televisual appearances than their cinematic appearances.
Is it animated?
It's animated, yep.
Is it Disney?
No.
Is it Nickelodeon?
It is Nickelodeon.
Is it Jimmy Neutron?
No.
Is it Fairly Odd Parents?
No.
Is it the fucking Rugrats Go Wild?
It's the fucking Rugrats, bro. So, for our final franchise of the season, we're going to be covering the Rugrats, the movie in Paris, and then we'll probably do the Wild Thornberrys movie, and then the Rugrats Go Wild. Which
is there a Wild Thornberrys movie?
Yes, there is, and it crashes the 2 franchises together in holy matrimony. I've been wanting to do this series for a long time. I'm excited.
Fucking don't shut up about it.
I just think it's great. I think Rugrats are fun. It'll be cool to...
Yes, I remember the Wild Thornberrys movie now, yeah.
Yeah. So, that'll be our last episode of the season. I think it's a good one to end on, yeah.
Well, I am drenched in sweat. I would love to end it here.
Well, if you guys would like to support Cold Popture and our sweaty boys, our sweaty asses on all the different places, please consider you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can also support our Patreon, patreon.com/coldpopture, and you can also join our Discord in the show notes where you can come and tell us what you thought of this episode and what you think of the next episode and what your expectations are. And stay tuned for after this music ends, where I'm sure you'll hear a very quick post-credit scene. This post-credit scene contains spoilers for Season 2 of Fleabag. This post-credit scene will also contain spoilers for The X-Files. Cool. Welcome along to the post-credit scene. This is a segment at the end of each episode where if you give us $5 or more over at patreon.com/coldpopture, then you get to give us something to talk about. And this, the post-credit scene, Richard, I know you're hot. I know you're sweaty. What is? Didn't you tease this? Didn't you say we were gonna?
So this is from Michael DeVos, who wrote, "My question is, what two characters had great romantic chemistry in film where they didn't get together? My example is Finn and Poe from the new Star Wars trilogy seemed like they were into each other more than anyone else. Oscar Isaac confirmed in an interview that he and John Boyega played it that way." Yeah, it's I think that there's a lot of like bro chemistry. You see a lot, and I was trying to think of like a platonic male and female friendship that had great chemistry, but I think the point of a lot of platonic male and female friendships is that they do end up together in movies. Anyway,
Danny Phantom and the goth chick.
Sam, yeah, that's actually a pretty good one. Another one, in the Oceans movies, Brad Pitt and George Clooney.
Oh,
like when you put two actors together that are known for just having chemistry with anyone, and to expand the sort of definition of not getting or ending up together, some of the best chemistry I've ever seen in anything of two characters that don't end up together in the end. Fleabag season 2.
Yeah, man.
Oh my god!
Spoilers for Fleabag. That's a great call.
Because but I think again that's one of those things where like Phoebe Waller-Bridge is obviously just like such a love, especially as Fleabag is just like you just love her so much, and Andrew Scott is just like a fucking charisma machine. Like that dude has chemistry with everyone, and I think the two of them together is like some of the spiciest, most delicious chemistry you'll ever see.
I thought it was great. And once I finally watched it after being convinced to.
Also, and Paddleton, Mark Duplass and Ray Romano.
Yeah.
So good.
I'm just going to put this at the start of the post-credit scene. This post-credit scene contains spoilers for season 2 of Fleabag. I'm not going to take that out of there. It's still going to remain in there. My answer is kind of complicated to this because I think the most palpable chemistry I've ever seen in something where they didn't get together for a long time, but eventually did, is Mulder and Scully in the X-Files, because what I think made that so palpable is the actors so clearly were ready to take it there, but the showrunner, the creator of the show, didn't want to, and so kind of by accident created this like tantalizing will they won't they that went for way too long.
Different creative voices fighting each other.
Yeah, and because of this, I just found their relationship, when I first watched The X-Files, I found it so fucking enticing and interesting, and they kind of, before they do officially get together, they play with it in some really fun ways. Like, there's an episode where there's like a body snatcher that has taken the form of Mulder, and he nearly kisses Scully, and so it's got stuff like that where it's like, one character is showing their true feelings, and to be honest, what's even more tantalizing about it is even the fact that they have spoilers for this post-credit scene will also contain spoilers for the X-Files. Is that by the end of the series and like these stupid revival seasons they did,
Reese Darby got with Scully.
Yeah, but they have a child in them.
Right.
But the weirdest thing about the X-Files is it's not really 100% sure where the child came from. Like, it's one of the weirdest things where, like, it's like they want them to have a child together, but they don't want to ever say they actually had sex. So, very tantalizing.
Yum, yum, yum.